energy's here to last, not a glass half full overflowed. Gotta keep your eyes up on the prize. Only got one life, so it's worth a try. To find what makes you feel alive, that's the only way to live it right. And now we're all doing our own things, but I'll never forget our glory days. My mind is full of the memories, yeah. And I'll never forget what they meant to me. Don't worry, we'll be back one day to celebrate our glory days. We'll be back one day. Although it's over now, don't let it get you down. We'll be back around. For now we can feel some sorrow. A new day, it starts tomorrow. We'll wake up, new dreams to follow. A new goal and brand new motto. One last time, let's live for something. I can feel my blood, it's rushing. This ain't goodbye. We'll be back someday, and we will find our own way. Take control of our fate.
Okay, and we're here. Oh, wait, hold on.
Crash and learn, make mistakes, and we'll be back one day.
Alright, now we're good. Aha! Nope, I still screwed up. Forgot something.
We'll be back one day.
Hey, there we go. Alright. Now our boy is spinning. Alright. So, I'm here. I'm live. I'm exhausted. We're doing it. Not only are we streaming, but I've got something specifically dear to me. This video keeps popping up on my recommendeds over and over and over again. It seems YouTube really wants me to say something about it. So, this is Balkan Odyssey's Defending Capitalism is Kinda Pathetic. And YouTube won't leave me alone until I view it. Apparently, it just keeps over and over again popping in front of me. So, and for anyone watching the VOD on this later, I am open to people coming in and debating me on mic about these topics. It might even happen in the stream. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. The link to the Discord that messaged me about it is in the description on most platforms. Or jump into any of the streams and just pop !Discord and it'll pop the link in the chat to get into Discord. So no one has any excuse. You can reach me. There it is. That's how you do it. Alright, so it looks like this is working, so I'm gonna get this going. There might be some audio back and forth. Want to make sure that's working correctly, and let's do it.
Capitalism is inevitable. It is the natural order of things, a part of human nature. It is the objective, neutral, non-ideological reflection of how the world works. Or at least, that's what its supposedly pragmatic and unbiased proponents would like you to think. And most people already do. Capitalism is the worst economic system except for all the others. Capitalism isn't perfect, but it's definitely the best economic system ever invented. There is no alternative. We have reached the end of history. That's just how the world works. Every single day, I read dozens of comments along the lines of, "I mostly agree with you, your analysis was spot on," until you started blaming capitalism. Communism has already been tried and it failed. Capitalism is imperfect, but it's the best we have. People seem to mostly agree with the critique of capitalism. They see its flaws and shortcomings. But for many, considering any kind of radical change, any kind of novel alternative, entices fear more than anything else. Despite being flawed and outright cruel in the eyes of many, capitalism is still treated as a comfort zone, as an imperfect protection from the horrors that might await us if we try to change it. To justify their conservatism, the partisans of the established order cannot really call it ideal or wonderful. Instead, they have decided to say that all the rest is horrible.
Okay. Oh man. It's already so he's already strawmanning really hard here. Describing, let's say for example, um, you know, people like me that would argue in capitalism's favor, right? I don't know if maybe he just hasn't encountered anyone that can actually give a strong argument for capitalism. There are plenty of pretty crap presenters and debaters on, I mean, any topic really. I mean, this is not. I don't think this is especially true of any position in particular. It's just there are people that are bad at debates. So, um, here's the thing. No, capitalism's not going to get you ideal anything, but neither is any other system. For the simple fact of basic human nature, I'm not going to say humans are evil or bad or any of that. I don't even agree with those topics or words being used in that way. It's that humans are different in perspective on an individual basis. There are a lot of similarities, but I've come to the conclusion that there's only one thing guaranteed across all humans, and that is breathing. And that's while we're still alive. Once you're dead, then not even that is true. Because you even have people that cannot agree on going forward with eating or drinking. You have people with food disorders. So you eating disorders. So you can't even say that all humans agree on eating and drinking to survive. There is not even that. Even surviving is not a thing everyone agrees on. Because there are people that are suicidal. Now, granted, they won't be counted amongst the rest for very long if they're successful in their ideal, forward progression in their current state of mind. Barring a better analytic description coming to mind. So yeah, the only thing that humans absolutely agree on, 100% across every single human, is that they are taking the breath they are currently taking. Everything else is on the table. Because of that, you will never, no matter what you do, find an ideal economic system while there are more than two humans, in which case, it's not really economics anymore, is it? It's just one guy surviving in the woods. Yeah, there's no traits, there's no economics. The very basis of economics to begin with is that there's a disparity of things desired, of desired outcomes. So one party gives X and the other gives Y, and both parties find that those things are more valuable than the things they currently have. So the entire system is based on a discrepancy of values and satisfaction with the current situation. Meaning that no matter what you do to the rest of the system, there's going to remain that disparity. It is inherent. which means you're gonna run into a difference of people agreeing what is good, what is bad, when violence is correct or necessary, etc., etc., etc. So it's always, or even taking part in any of that at all in the first place, even being part of the conversation. You will always have homeless, even if we have, you know, infinite housing, because some people are gonna want to just go live in the woods like animals. um, it's gonna, yeah, you're always gonna have some unemployment. Um, Trying to get 100% equality of outcomes is a fool's errand. So because of that, you're never gonna have an ideal system if that is your basis of ideal. So instead, we go for an ideal system for any ideal, or ideal system for the pursuit of one's ideal, or you could say the pursuit of happiness. And if people fail at that along the way, then yeah, that's their fault. or misfortune hit them, in which case you cannot safeguard every single human being from misfortune, unless you're gonna make everyone pod people. I don't mean like the WEF pod people, I mean literally the Matrix. Then there you go. Then I suppose perfection has been obtained.
Sure, they say, we may not live in a condition of perfect goodness, but we're lucky we don't live in a condition of evil. Our democracy is not perfect, but it's better than the bloody dictatorships. Capitalism is unjust, but it's not criminal like Stalinism. We let millions of Africans die of AIDS, but we don't make racist declarations like Milosevic. We kill Iraqis with our airplanes, but we don't cut their throats with machetes like they do in Rwanda, etc. As Mark Fisher puts it,
That was just a string of assigned whataboutism. No, there's I'm gonna say that by the system in concept, capitalism is just. The problem is you have a bunch of unjust people running around inside said system. Why do those people get a free pass and the game is blamed? And you have people rigging the game through use of governments, not the capitalistic system. Jeez.
lowering our expectations, we are told, is a small price to pay for being protected from terror and totalitarianism.
That's garbage. Lower. I wouldn't say it's lowering expectations. I'd say it's side grading it from realizing that that is not ideal to try to protect everyone. That's not a good ideal. You want to allow people to do what they want. You have two options. You can allow people to do what they want to do, or you can protect them from everything. And that's the actual spectrum that you're working with. So even right here, we run into this a disparity. I have a preference for allowing people to do what they want to do, and thus far, the current global status seems to say that doing such has the better results. But then you have the other opinion that we should focus on protecting people to the extent of protecting them from themselves. In which case, the obvious comeback to that is, who are you to decide on a grand systematic scale what is the good, how do you figure out on a massive population level scale, yeah, the scale of a population, what is good for them individually on on the most minute matters of life without expending astronomical resources in figuring that out? Sure, a lot of people probably fall into some pretty basic brackets, hence why, say, marketing works so well, or targeted ads, or how the inside of grocery stores are set up. That's all done on purpose because the vast majority of people fall under certain brackets. But that's not everyone. And in which case, if you're going to say, oh, we're fine with sacrificing the 5 to 15% that are screwed by our overbearing, in theory, and guess what? You have fallen into the same pit that you attribute to capitalism. Because while not everyone is thriving, the grand majority are surviving. Except the people that are thriving are allowed to thrive, and thus help bring everyone up along the way.
Such fear-mongering is, indeed, a vital component in maintaining the illusion of capitalist omnipresence and necessity. While dismissing all alternatives as ideological and therefore dogmatic, capitalist ideology, the most pervasive and all-encompassing of all, presents itself as non-existent, residing both everywhere and nowhere, as a deity that simply is, as a default state of affairs interwoven into the very fabric of reality, as something that transcends the individual agency of this singular human being, and is thus inevitable. As Comrade Second Thought eloquently explained this mindset in one of his videos,
capitalism isn't even the best choice between a rock and a hard place. It's not a choice at all. It's natural. Resisting it is as pointless as trying to resist the laws of physics.
advocating for the maintenance of capitalism is therefore seen as non-ideological, as pragmatic, objective, neutral, and unbiased, whereas any counter-propositions to its malignancies is treated as deeply ideological, unnecessarily and aggressively political, and perhaps utopian, as something arbitrarily and forcefully imposed onto the natural state of things. At this point, we reach the supreme irony of how ideology functions today. It appears precisely as its own opposite, as a radical critique of ideological utopias. The predominant ideology today is not a positive vision of some utopian future, but a cynical resignation, an acceptance of how the world really is, accompanied by a warning that if we want to change it too much, only totalitarian horror can ensue. We thus appear to live in a post-ideological, post-historical world, where all other solutions to human organization have apparently been tried and are presented as so broken and dystopian that they must be avoided at all costs. Therefore, the necessary evil, capitalism...
Okay, he's not about to say that communism's never actually been tried, right? Or socialism, or whichever system he's about to put forward. I mean, I'm assuming it's something along the lines of socialism.
prevails, and is in fact so inevitable that it doesn't even need to be named anymore. In fact, you will rarely hear a politician or neoclassical economist use the word capitalism. There simply are moderate, quasi-left and right policies that already presuppose capitalism as their base. Like carbon monoxide slowly seeping into the airwaves of our social organism completely undetected, the hegemony of capital has become so pervasive and all-encompassing that it gives off the impression like it doesn't even exist as a distinct socioeconomic system and mode of production that has come into existence only in the past few hundred years. It seems like that's just how the world has always worked. So by lethargically looking at history and all of our failed attempts to find a sustainable alternative, it turns out to be easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capital. Well, as Charles Baudelaire famously proclaimed, the biggest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. valiantly and wholeheartedly defending the hegemony.
Okay, listen. You can try to make like the point of why that statement is so like deep sounding is because you can apply it to literally anything and completely shut down your opposition. And that's because it's presupposition. It's presupposing the devil does exist in the first place. In which case, yeah. But here's the thing. What if the devil doesn't exist? Then where are you? You still have to prove that the devil does exist, and then you can say that, oh, then the devil turned around and convinced everyone else he doesn't exist.
Hegemony of the established world order against the dark specter of communism, of the potentiality of something new, is somehow seen as courageous and virtuous, while opposing it is seen as treacherous, dangerous, and dystopian. Thus, the reverse psychology of capitalist realism is more sinister than any dystopia Orwell or Huxley ever could have imagined. War is peace, freedom is slavery, and as Zizek is often cited saying, ideology today is unfreedom, which you sincerely personally experience as freedom. Nonetheless, the ways in which capitalism establishes its status as the omnipresent, objective truth primarily include tampering with our perception of history. As Mark Fisher puts it, the power of capitalist realism derives in part from the way that capitalism subsumes and consumes all of previous history. Deleuze and Guattari describe capitalism as a kind of dark potentiality which haunted all previous social systems. Capital, they argue, is the untamable thing, the abomination which primitive and feudal societies warded off in advance. In its
What?
conquest of appropriating all of human history.
Also, how much of this video is going to be just quoting that same book? Telling me that, like, if the video ends with basically in summary, go read Capitalism Realism, or whatever that what was the book? Yeah, Capitalist Realism. Oh boy. Alright, we're about to jump into Human Nature. That's the name of this chapter. Human Nature. Alright, let's see how this, if this fits what I was saying previously or not.
In its conquest of appropriating all of human history, the most popular argument is that humans have supposedly always been greedy, competitive, and profit-seeking, just like our beloved capitalists. This very argument, besides being palpably wrong in every way possible, as already
I would.
explained in a video of my own, but also by Hakim and Second Thought on their channels, is a perfect example of capitalist realism and its business ontology.
What? Are you about to tell me that the cavemen trying to not get eaten or freeze to death were not fueled by self-interest like every other animal is? Like, the things that keep animals in balance is not the animal in question. It is everything else around it in nature putting physical blockages upon it. If it was the animals themselves not being driven by a expansionist drive, then you wouldn't have such a thing as invasive species or the apocalyptic wars that span entire large U.S. states that ants have between each other, using tactics that would be extremely against the Geneva Convention, effectively war criming all day, every day, with us not even paying attention. Like, what? Yeah, it's absolutely inhuman. The difference between humans and the rest of the animals in that regard is that our intelligence means that it is way harder for physical blockages to hold us back now that we've hit this level for more than like today's level for any significant amount of time. We'll find a way of bending the universe itself to our will and overcoming whatever physical blockages. Like the reason for tribalism was it was practical. It's because that our food supply was very specifically here, and by the time you got to anyone else that wasn't us here with our food supply, you are very far away from this food supply because, or relatively very far away, because it takes a very long time to travel. Because it takes a very long time to travel, it's very difficult to build up stable relations with other people because, you know, it's hard. It takes a while to learn a language, especially when you may not have other people that already know your language to help you translate it, right? And if you happen to get knocked off your food supply, there is no guarantee that you will find another food supply. Our food supply is here. It's not necessarily anywhere else that there isn't already humans claiming it. It might be, but who knows? And it's very easy to starve to death before you find another food supply. Particularly once you got to large populations with a significant agricultural base. Which does go towards a lot of other advantages, but one disadvantage is you become very tied to the ground. So there wasn't a whole lot of mobility. That is only something that has been begun to be solved recently with trains, cars, airplanes, and now the internet allowing for very fast communication over absolutely massive distances. But yeah, all of those rules as to why tribalism exists is because of the physical situations before modern technology, and now people are already forgetting within, you know, about 200 years of when this started changing, why those are a thing, why that is how it is. It's just either assumed as part of human nature or it's written off entirely as a thing to begin with. Like even trying to get a large amount of food in ancient days, it wasn't because they didn't want more food, it's because there was a huge amount of effort in getting the food, and food doesn't store for very long. Not to mention it also makes you more of a target for other for competitors. But you always stocked up enough to let's say in feudalism, right? You stocked up enough food for four things: to feed yourself, to send to your lord, that your lord then did part of the third thing, which was stock food aside to survive a siege if it came to it. And you would also stock up enough food to survive the winter. So you're always trying to get more. That never goes away.
We are being convinced by all its agents and pundits alike that engaging in ruthless competition at the expense of others, kicking the ladder and greedily enjoying the spoils is simply a natural state of being, reflected throughout our own history, but also in the animal kingdom. ignoring the fact that this is merely how less than 1% of people have the privilege to successfully operate. This kind of philosophy is implanted into the rest of us as the meritocratic potentiality of social mobility, and thus becoming the bourgeois, only if you work hard enough. There is a conscious attempt to justify present economic hierarchies, but also to present everything as monetizable, commodifiable, and sellable in some way, as if everything can and should be run as a business. And businesses, let's not forget, at its
I like how he mentioned the arguments and then just kept going.
simply a natural state of being, reflected throughout our own history, but also in the animal kingdom, ignoring the fact that this is merely how less than 1% of people have the
He just says it's a fact. With nothing to put. This is just nonstop presupposition. This is the level of supposition. Jeez, it's hard to say. Presuppositionalism happening here is like on par with like Darth Dawkins, except Darth Dawkins was way more what's the word, really controlling the conversation. I have actually encountered Darth Dawkins once. I actually was supposed to debate him, and then just the course of stuff, he ended up debating someone else who was nowhere near as up to the challenge. It was an angry, like, high, like, smoking weed during the debate 19-year-old socialist. Sorry, debating Darth Dawkins on the existence of God while being super high. It didn't go very well. I just kind of sat back and watched and laughed. But yeah, the level. Anyone that's not familiar, Darth Dawkins, he's like this older guy that goes around pretty much anywhere he's allowed to and debates people on the existence of God and uses a very trap-filled presuppositionalism argument. That, you know, especially now that I've dissected his argument, is not all that impressive. Yeah, he tries to force you through very strong conversational control to accept a whole lot of statements of fact that are not necessarily actually the case. And in doing so, he kind of just convinces you to cede the argument to him, more or less. Because his entire argument is based upon if you agree to these specific things. I don't remember the exact points he uses, but it's very good at getting gotchas. And that's about it.
privilege to successfully operate.
Okay, so 1%. So he's saying that the quote unquote fact of the matter is that only a very small percentage of the population, 1% of population, is capable of competing, of actually being competitive in the market. That's simply not the case. First off, you have to define what you mean by competitive. What does that mean? Like, as a business, as a person, X amount of money, the things you can do with that money. I mean, there's a lot you can do with not that much money if you have access to other things like contacts, so social capital. To move things through other people's money or through politics, so you can use influence. It depends on what your goals are. You're talking about like world leaders? I mean, most of them aren't even that rich. I mean, plenty of them are very, very rich, but there's also people that, compared to other people, are not actually that rich, and then other people that are not world leaders and are way more rich. Like, Elon Musk is not a world leader, but he is currently a bit of a business and tech titan. Is he part of the 1%? Even though he doesn't necessarily move the government all that much. It also depends on which government you're talking about. Like, there's a lot buried in this statement that is completely unqualified. And again, it's just his argument can be great if you presuppose that all of these factual statements are correct, but he doesn't give any basis for them. He just says them. It's a lot of unfounded claims.
This kind of philosophy is implanted into the rest of us as the meritocratic potentiality of social mobility, and thus becoming the bourgeois, only if you work hard enough. There is a conscious attempt to justify present economic hierarchies, but also to present everything as monetizable, commodifiable, and sellable in some way, as if everything can and should be run as a business. And business is, let's not forget, at its very essence the ultimate expression of a dictatorial hierarchy.
What?
Now, with a quick glance at the actual development of human society,
I run into this like outlook so much. What about business is tyrannical? Like, seriously, you know what you can't do in like true totalitarian governments? Leave. You know what you can any moment of any day in a business? You can leave. You can quit. You can go to another business. You don't have to put up with anything a business does to you any longer than you actually want to. If you are putting up with stuff you don't want to put up with, then guess what? You either are actually okay with it and just want to complain, or you have no spine. In which case, nothing I do will possibly help you. Even if we give you exactly the situation you want, you will still be oppressed by somebody somewhere down the line because you have no spine.
we soon discover that human history is riddled with various modes of production and economic systems that perpetually outgrew one another, with each epoch carrying the seeds of its own dissolution. We will also see that the capitalist mentality of unquestionable monetization and commodification of everything in existence, fueled by greed and self-interest, presents in fact a very minuscule part of the human experience. Mutual aid and cooperation have been an equally decisive factor in these developments, despite this cynical outlook on the human condition. Humans have helped each other, collaborated, and complemented each other's wisdom and abilities to create marvels of ingenuity, as much as they have spent their intellect and energy in finding ways of conquering, genociding, and exploiting each other. As Peter Kropotkin said, sociability is as much a law of nature as mutual struggle. For example, one of the earliest phases in human socioeconomic organization.
I like how he figured out that those things are not mutually exclusive, except, like, how does this turn into another argument against capitalism? Capitalism is obviously built upon that being part of the system. You can compete with someone in a way that will not necessarily cause them harm. Yeah, okay. Friendly rivalries in incredibly competitive environments seem to be frequently the norm and are used for the good of everyone involved. It's a great motivator. Which we want to get the most out of everyone working in a system, do we not? Because frankly, if we're working together on a team and you're not pulling your share of the weight, then or not pulling your share of the weight. You are not attempting. You are not making a good faith attempt to do your best. Then I personally am going to be a bit annoyed. I won't be surprised, but I'll be annoyed. Because that means to hit goals we would otherwise hit, I have to work harder. So you want everyone pushing as hard as you can. Well, some people need a motivation boost. I mean, it's actually the reason I'm streaming right now, honestly. I was so tired before I started streaming. I was like, I don't want to stream today, but I have goals and dreams, and they require me to output work. So here I am.
Often called primitive communism, did not have any social classes, country borders, or even money. The development from this state of affairs to class society, which manifested through slavery, feudalism, and capitalism, is a well-documented historical fact, explored in great detail in Engels's monumental work, Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. So, just because greed is one part of human nature and has been present throughout history, does not justify maintaining a system that rewards it. Capitalism is not a full reflection of who we are and have been as humans, but merely a system that rewards and emphasizes our worst sides. To look at people in capitalist society and conclude that human nature is egoism is like looking at people in a factory where pollution is destroying their lungs and saying that it is human nature to cough. As we will ultimately conclude what has already been an established scientific and philosophical truth for over 2 centuries, the only constant in life is change, and those who insist that capitalism is natural and unchangeable will be as silly as when we look back at those who defended the hegemony of kings and monarchs on the basis of divine right.
Wait, what was that statement?
For centuries, the only constant in life is change.
Okay.
And those who insist that capitalism is natural and unchangeable will be as silly as when we look back at those who defended the hegemony of kings and monarchs on the basis of divine right.
The things about capitalism you can't change aren't things inherent to capitalism, they're the things that are inherent to reality. Like I mentioned before, I forgot to do the strap while I was doing all these browns.
Alright, so why is it then that we always hear the same arguments and surface level catchphrases being fired as rhetorical ammunition ad nauseam?
Do we though? Or maybe I don't, because I'm not on the other side, but I mean, I don't. Most of these aren't even the arguments I would actually proffer if taken up on it.
Why do we still have people who get neurotic and emotional in their sacred duty to defend capitalism, even when they're being exploited themselves? Why are you yourself, dear viewer, still perhaps skeptical of any alternatives and prefer to cling on to the status quo just in case? Let's take a look at a few possible reasons. Well, the first category of people would be those who base their worldview on a deep misunderstanding of what capitalism is. How many times have you heard or said how it's not capitalism, it's globalism, corporatism, the Jews, corruption, bad mentality and mindset, crony, predatory capitalism, etc.? How many times have you heard someone defend capitalism on the premise that this current abomination is in fact not the true, pure reflection of...
Okay, alright, sure. You really want to go down that road? You want to go down that road with Stalin and Mao and Lenin and, what's his name? Whatever. With, what's his name in Cuba? And, you know, the other Central American, South American communist states over the Cold War. You really wanna use that argument? Because man, that really ends up making you look way worse in the near term than it does capitalism. Not sure if you want to go down that road, bro.
Capitalist philosophy, completely ignoring the historical context. Those who argue how this is not real capitalism ignore the fact that socioeconomic systems, including capitalism, go through various different phases according to the dialectical development of societal contradictions. For example, the level of development of the productive forces, the degree and severity of class struggle, advancement in information technology, the degree of centralization of capital, etc. This ignorance about the very fluid logic of the development of socioeconomic systems is led by the presumption that corruption, lobbyism, and similar ills are just bugs in the otherwise benevolent system that can be fixed, perhaps by reverting to a historical stage where none of this existed. A purely idealistic and metaphysical fantasy.
There has never been a point at which corruption did not exist. Say straight up. Corruption will always be there. The goal is to clamp down on it. Not try to eradicate it, because you won't. But try to keep it on manageable levels.
Of some pure version of capitalism that supposedly existed at its very beginnings, until it got corrupted by corporations and big government. In essence, what...
Okay, well, yeah, it can be corrupted. The current economic system can be... Okay, he just... Hold on, I gotta go back to make sure I'm getting this right.
Have you heard or said how it's not capitalism, it's globalism, corporatism, the Jews, corruption, bad mentality and mindset, crony, predatory capitalism, etc.? How many times have you heard someone defend capitalism on the premise that this current abomination is in fact not the true, pure reflection of capitalist philosophy, completely ignoring the historical context? Those who argue how this is...
Didn't he just go over how there's like a bunch of fluidity in the development of capitalism or any other economic system? Didn't he just go over that? Which means that in theory what we have right now is not the most quote unquote ideal form of capitalism. It can be out of balance. He just set himself up to destroy his own point.
Not real capitalism. Ignore the fact that socioeconomic systems, including capitalism, go through various different phases according to the dialectical development of societal contradictions.
Oh wait, no, it's right here. It's right here.
Reflection of capitalist philosophy, completely ignoring the historical context. Those who argue how...
Ignoring the... Isn't that acknowledging the... Acknowledging that? The system changes in small ways over time?
This is not real capitalism. Ignore the fact that socioeconomic systems, including capitalism, go through various different phases according to the dialectical development of societal contradictions. For example, the level of development of the productive forces, the degree and severity of class struggle, advancement in information technology, the degree of centralization of capital, etc. This ignorance about the very fluid logic of the development of socioeconomic systems is led by the presumption that corruption, lobbyism, and similar ills are just bugs in the otherwise benevolent system that can be fixed, perhaps by reverting to a historical stage where none of this existed. A purely idealistic and metaphysical fantasy of some pure version of capitalism that supposedly existed at its very beginnings, until it got corrupted by corporations and big government. In essence, what they're suggesting is to revert things back to how they apparently were at the outset, to strip their current hegemons of their power, thus leveling the playing field, and then eventually themselves become the new hegemons of an apparently more just order that would, due to its inherent tendencies and logic, almost inevitably develop into something like what we have today. Because the winners of initial market competition will always do everything to sabotage their competitors and install systems that maintain their hegemony. So, they're basically crying from under the ladder that was kicked into their noses and begging to restart the game because it was unfair. This is of course absurd, because capitalism, as every other mode of production, has different levels of maturity according to the severity of societal contradictions and degrees of class struggle. And all these aberrations they call crony capitalism, corporatism, or globalism are merely vaguely defined stages in this historical development. Historically, capitalism has always found clever ways to conform itself to popular pressure, to subsume and appropriate the struggle against itself, and seek reforms and afford concessions.
This assumes that capitalism is a movement. Like, find me the capitalist political party anywhere. Like, find me the out and out capitalist party. If it's so pervasive, someone somewhere would have formalized this and been proud about it. I mean, you have an actual official communist party in the US. You really think there wouldn't be a capitalist party if it, like, anywhere? Or is it just all other parties are capitalist and or fascist? Like, which is it?
Then may guarantee its undisturbed reproduction, suggesting that we should or possibly can ever revert the global behemoth back to a stage where things were arranged in a certain way that would accommodate their wishes and interests is insane. Political economy is not a game of grand strategy where you can arbitrarily impose certain characteristics onto a system and swap them like custom appendages according to popular vote or technocratic mandate.
Wait,
The
can't
forces
you?
of production and societal relations have their own, suggesting that we should or possibly can ever revert the global behemoth back to a stage where things were arranged in a certain way that would accommodate their wishes and interests is insane. Political economy is not a game of grand strategy where you can arbitrarily impose certain characteristics onto a system and swap them like custom appendages according to popular vote or technocratic mandate.
What? Isn't that exactly what politics is? Isn't that exactly how the system works? Oh, hey, this thing isn't working. We think this other thing might work better. Let's replace that thing and make it a different thing. What is this guy on about? What is politics then? What even happens in politics? What? Didn't what? I'm not saying that most of them will work or do well, but yeah, like systems and ideas within politics get pulled down and replaced wholesale with other stuff all the time. It's not necessarily easy to do, but it does indeed happen all the time.
The forces of production and societal relations have their own dialectic of development, which is fought in the arena of class struggle, not in the minds or deeds of individuals or interest groups. So, no, it's not corporatism or globalism we live in, but capitalism at a certain stage of development, a very advanced stage in fact. And no.
No, it's not that, it's this. Doesn't describe it, just applies a different... He just swapped out corporatism for, quote, late-stage capitalism. That's just a different name for it. You didn't define it or show how that's different from what other people call it. You just retermed it and said you're right. Good lord.
Corruption, lobbyism, and environmental destruction are not bugs of the system upheld by a clique of globalist conspirators aiming to suffocate real capitalism, therefore mere mistakes that can be avoided or ameliorated, but inherent features without which the system cannot function. Now, the second broad category, albeit a more straightforward one, would be those who are simply scared or indoctrinated by relentless anti-communist propaganda. The very fear-mongering described at the beginning serves a very self-evident purpose and is being deployed on mass scale, even after the Cold War, with the remnants of the Red Scare and McCarthyism marauding in our mainstream and alternative media alike, with infinitely wise right-wing pundits spouting the same talking points and catchphrases that have been refuted by Marxists and practical experience.
Excuse me, I'm a centrist, and all you need for anti-communist propaganda is open a history book. If that doesn't do the job, then you aren't reading close enough. You really don't require that much in the way of propaganda to make most people anti-communist. You pretty much just need to give them a basic rundown of the USSR, and if you want, throw in China for good measure. Throw in North Korea, or Cuba, or like literally every, or literally any and all of them. Every single one has had the same outcome. I mean, at least they nailed that part of equality of outcome. They all had the same outcome. Totalitarianism has been the outcome of communism every single time, and these people are, or at least this guy anyway, is pushing for the insanity plea hardcore, and that we should keep trying until we see real communism. Even while he says that capitalists say, yeah, the capitalists do the same argument. Oh, it's not real capitalism. No, I'll say it's real capitalism. It's real capitalism with the current level of government corruption, which is government corruption. That has very little to do with the economic system. It's why you see capitalism manifest in different ways across different countries. Usually these days with some counterbalance of socialism thrown in. Like the Nordic states, for example. Or China, modern day China, which I would say is state capitalist and not even communist anymore. Because it's just, pardon me. It's just, companies owned by a bigger company. What's up, TD Pex? Welcome to the stream. How are you? Also, I don't think I've met a single person that liked capitalism because they were scared, specifically. I'm pretty tired, but overall, pretty good. I'd say on paper, I'm doing great. I'm just tired. So I was like, let me do this, because this I'm familiar with. This I can do. I guess if he's trying to say that capitalists being loyal to capitalism because they're scared of communism, I suppose that could be a thing. I suppose those people. Why would you be primarily doing it? I guess they just don't understand the benefits of capitalism then. I defend capitalism because I legitimately like capitalism. Capitalism is legitimately good, in my opinion. I enjoy it. Let's make some more money.
For over 2 centuries, to the point where they've become laughable memes. Just keep in mind that every opinion piece that uncritically regurgitates the same anti-communist, anti-feminist, or anti-environmentalist talking points are, more often than not, funded and financed by capital interests, whose primary goal is to keep...
Wait, who's getting my checks then? I'm being funded? I'm being funded to destroy the environment? Who's stealing my money then? Cause I'm not getting them. Man, apparently I'm getting robbed.
things as they are. You, as a potential advocate of their system, are just an expendable appendage in their crusade. An appendage terrified by their dystopian warnings and beginning to slowly identify with your captors and defend their right to exploit you, in a collective display of the Stockholm Syndrome that keeps you politically sterile and paralyzed. Then we have the personal responsibility gang, those who live out their arrogance and survivor bias to the fullest. This type of apology
He's talking to me now. Yep, he's talking to me now. Let me tell you, I am legitimately better than all of you. Why? Because I work hard. Whatever that means.
will predictably accuse progressives of rejecting personal accountability and responsibility, for blaming others and blaming some abstract thing called capitalism for their own problems and suffering. You know, the whole Jordan Peterson clean up your room first, life is suffering kind of bullshit. As we have seen,
He just keeps making, like, statements with no backing argument. He just states them. Just states them and moves on. How is the personal responsibility claim not legitimate? He won't tell me. he won't tell me. Why? This is, defending capitalism is kind of pathetic by Balkan Odyssey. I pulled it up because YouTube refuses to stop recommending it to me over and over and over again. It recommends it. And I didn't want to keep going for the third time trying to go through the not so erudite shoplifting thing I was going over last week. Not to mention I haven't seen online today the person I was going through it with. So I was like, alright, I don't have another plan and I'm tired, but I can talk about capitalism all day. So So yeah, we're going with this. Feel free to throw in your own thoughts, by the way.
such people are perfectly fine with pointing out individual, isolated problems that are simply impossible to ignore, while simultaneously gaslighting you into not criticizing the totality of the very system itself that hosts those symptoms. Imagine you slip.
Wait, who's saying to ignore the system? If anything, learn the system so you can use it to your advantage. The whole point. That's 100% of the point. You'll learn capitalism so you can use capitalism. That's what capitalism wants you to do. It asks you to. It literally demands you learn the system and use it to your advantage. That is the whole point. If you are not doing it, then you are literally not playing the game. However, the game is hard. The game is Dark Souls-esque. You gotta get good, literally. Study it, learn how money works, how the markets work, how people work. That salad just keeps wanting to make itself present.
Slip and fall every single day onto the same slippery floor at your workplace, with all your pleas to your boss.
If your workplace is I said it before, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying it. I've been saying it on and off stream for years. If your workplace isn't treating you well, the only thing keeping you there is you. You can leave any moment of any day. You can go out and look for another job. You can ask for raises. You can try to get better treatment through other routes if you want to keep the job. But like you have options. When the state is involved, you don't have options. That's the difference. The real tyranny comes from the tyrants. It's very straightforward.
Bosses to fix the safety hazard falling on deaf ears. And now you have this unbearable back pain that's making your life miserable. Now, imagine you come to your doctor and they simply inject you with a local painkiller, with the only comment being that you should stop blaming slippery floors, or your boss who is ignoring the safety hazard, or outside factors, and should in fact look at yourself and take personal responsibility for what's happening. And this is precisely what apologists of capitalism are suggesting. Stop blaming the slippery floor or your boss who is refusing to fix it, take a temporary local painkiller for your pain, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. In short, stop blaming capitalism, implement a band-aid solution to hide the suffering, and do the bootstrap thing. Don't worry about the system, that's just how the world works, and it's your fault if it works against you. Oh, and your suffering is normal, so just get used to it. Nonetheless, the next broad category is, in a way, an extension of the personal responsibility gang, who equally fetishize.
Man, he's really going right after me in particular, as this is, according to the socialists, the category I fall under as a self-employed person. Petty bourgeoisie. That is me.
Personal success stories as examples of how the system can be used to your advantage. You know, the good old from rags to riches American dream sort of thing. A fairy tale that has been exposed as utterly ridiculous in the light of increasingly monopolistic, predatory, and ruthless behavior of the lucky
Have a good night, TD.
pioneers of competitive capitalism who have now become the sentinels of monopoly capitalism. These petty
Where and how was this determined to be a fantasy? People become rich all the time. What is he talking about? There's no receipts given for any of this. He's just stating nonsense.
individuals take the possibility of one day becoming a millionaire and member of the haute bourgeoisie with their brilliant entrepreneurship and financial gymnastics around the system itself, and sell it as a noble lifestyle that everyone can follow, ignoring the fact that only a select few can end up in the elite club. They see their chances of social.
Yeah, not everyone makes it. That's part of the system. You don't want everyone to make it, because not everyone is good at it. You want the people that are good at it to make it. In any field, it's the whole point of it's just a division. It's not a division of labor. It's the system finding the people with the competency to actually do the jobs, because if they can't do the jobs, then they will inherently fall to the side. When you have people that can't do a job taking over the job, you get the Holodomor. Because they went in and killed all the landowners for the farms, and then the people working the farms didn't know how to run farms. So they all died.
Mobility is almost guaranteed due to their street smarts of generating passive income, investing in crypto and stocks, waking up at 3 in the morning to do dropshipping and work on 3 other side hustles. And they do their best to convince you that it's your fault if you let them rule over you.
I usually wake up at 10 a.m. and this is my side hustle that I am trying to turn into my full time. I'm primarily a web dev. I get up at 3. I go to bed at 3. This whole video has been a string of strawmen, uh, unbacked statements and presuppositionalism with a hearty quantity of relabeling. I'm gonna relabel this so I can call the old label incorrect, factually incorrect. Jeez.
Instead of becoming one of the rulers yourself. Many of the petite bourgeois, that is, small business owners, managerial professionals, miniature stockholders, and financial gamblers, in actuality share more material interest with the working class that they despise so incredibly much than with the big bourgeoisie that they aspire to join.
Assuming I despise the average person. Good lord. I suppose I hate everyone around me.
The bourgeoisie proper directs enormous efforts into anti-competitive, monopolistic, and predatory machinations to maintain their position at the top of the pyramid. The ruling class is a very, very premium club, and the pathetic wet dreams of the metropolitan petite bourgeois will not change their self-interested practices of utterly anti-meritocratic, nepotist, and dynastical rule. So, in a nutshell, such people admit that the system, or the matrix, is unfair and rigged. But instead of advocating for its abolition, they opt to take advantage of it and become members of the ruling class. Their philosophy is eat or be eaten. Why fight them when you can join them? Why show solidarity with your fellow working class when you are just a temporarily embarrassed billionaire? Another closely aligned category of people would be the so-called labor aristocracy. Essentially, a very privileged subsection of the working class which, despite working for a wage, nonetheless enjoys great social security benefits compared to their counterparts of the third world. This segment of the working class lives in traditionally...
Wait. Is he about to just call, like, the vast majority of Americans and Europeans the labor aristocracy because their countries did it better than the third world did? What? Oh boy.
imperious countries of the global north or the OECD, countries that are known for their social democracies and directly reap the benefits of the colonial, neo-colonial, and imperialist super-exploitation of third world labor and agriculture and their cheap, blood-soaked commodities. They're essentially bribed into compliance by their ruling class. They're given a relatively comfortable life with some upward mobility and social security, comparatively.
The cheap labor exploitation. The exploitation part is more often a local problem. The cheap labor part is actually helping them. Legitimately. This is now a thing that is happening in China, where because for the last 20, 30, 40 years, China was the cheap labor capital of the world. Now the Chinese are running into a problem where most of their population is overqualified for cheap labor positions because they can now afford to get better education. So they're no longer cheap labor. And that's just what keeps happening. It's just a giant circle of that. Now Africa and Mexico are looking like they're going to be picking up that same ball. And being the cheap labor sector of the world is honestly a great position for those countries to be in. You either want to be at the top or the bottom. Honestly, the middle is the hardest part. Because the middle, it's really hard to figure out what you're supposed to be doing when you're in the middle. Because it's hard to figure out what you have to offer. And usually those countries end up being the actually crappy places. Or I should say top or the up and coming bottom. the up and coming bottom, the countries that have positioned themselves to become said cheap labor, which for the last like generation was pretty much just China. Now that China's getting knocked out of that, a lot of other countries are stepping up to the plate and are about to reap the riches for it. Because the money never stays still. The money goes somewhere. It's not going to stay in the US. It's going to flow elsewhere.
Solid labor protection laws and union representation, even though they are employed in arguably unproductive sectors of the economy. From the perspective of societal
Arguably unproductive. If they weren't productive, they wouldn't be getting paid, would they?
use values.
Because literally it's this is the crazy double standard. I'm not saying that like employee bloat doesn't happen, but in the long term, capitalism, by the terms he just said, of capitalism being hyper competitive and dog eat dog, means that you have to be constantly slimming down inefficiencies. So you're not going to be paying people to do jobs that are not producing something. It's a waste of money and resources. Eventually someone will come around, cut the fat, and those same resources will be put somewhere that is productive.
Unproductive professions would be, for example, management, marketing, and finance. Whereas from the perspective
Oh, really? Those are unproductive. Man, that's a constant failing of pretty much every socialist I've ever run into, in which case they are all still stuck in the exact same time period that Marx wrote the book. They think everyone's in a bloody factory. No, when you're in a developed society, you require marketing. Because your stuff is not automatically getting bought or transferred to someone that wants it. You are making a lot of stuff that people don't necessarily need, but they want. But they don't always, in fact, most of the time, don't actually know that they want the thing. So you have to show them the thing, and then they decide that they want it. If you say that that is not the case, or that that is a bad thing, because people shouldn't be getting things that they want. Well, I really want to know what your personal entertainment system, whatever it may be, in whatever form it is, and why you have one. People want entertainment, which means that there must be some form of stuff that people want to get to obtain, to enjoy. But we're not just gonna give everyone one TV. Which TV? Like this. Like the marketing to see that there is a TV available, a bigger TV, a nicer TV available, so I can get the TV, or monitor, or laptop, or video game, or like, what are you talking about? Marketing is one of the most important jobs, because without the marketers, the things getting built in the factories have nowhere to go, because no one's going to show up to buy them without marketing. That's why it's one of the most lucrative careers a person can go into while still being a wage slave, right? While still being an employee. Is marketer. If you become a good marketer, you are practically you're practically guaranteed money.
Perspective of capital accumulation, unproductive professions would, according to certain Marxist interpretations, include basically everything that is not involved in industrial production, agriculture, and transportation.
Except a vast amount of the developed countries' labor is no longer in those sectors, and that's on purpose because people have become, by and large, overqualified for those positions. No one that has a bachelor degree is going to want to work in assembly line. Again, this is where like Marxists are stuck in the early, yeah, actually not even the early to middle industrial revolution. They still think Henry Ford created the assembly line 10 years ago. That's why we go to places that don't have very good education. We employ them to do the assembly line labor until they can afford the same level of education we have as a society and individually, both. And then they can also join us in figuring out how we're going to next make sure someone's building all our stuff. And the hope is we figure out a way for machines to do, all of the baseline stuff before we run out of countries to pay. I was gonna say pawn off, but no, the whole point is that that's not actually the case. Paying them to do our manual labor. Did I highlight all this stuff or not? No, I did. It's just some of it, I guess, is rubbed off. I don't know.
Which would, more concretely, include labor employed in the entertainment, commercial, and service sectors. So, depending on your definitions, the labor aristocracy may include a small privileged section of the workers in the global north, or almost its entire working class. But this is a discussion for another time. The crux of the matter is that these workers are, for the most part, perfectly compliant with the imperialist system of exploitation and destruction of the rest of the world, while their class antagonisms are kept cool and class struggle is bastardized into a mere negotiation about wages and paid vacation. For the comparably prosperous and comfortable existence of a large section of the global north working class, which has never experienced the other side of capitalism, radical change and international communism come off as threats to this very delicate arrangement between them and their domestic bourgeois. The numerous concessions and benefits accorded for the sake of class peace turn this section of the population into compliant advocates of the existing system, and the maintenance of neocolonial and imperialist exploitation based on national chauvinist and racist mythology, which serves to rationalize and justify this inhuman
They just jump straight into this is just an endless parade of Marxist like talking points without any actual substance to the argument. It's just like a 101 of what to like scream at your opposition, because as soon as they start asking questions, you're not going to have anything to back them up.
degradation of the rest of the world and their parasitic relationship towards it. Radical change seems to be only initiated and requested from those who have it truly urgent and burning under their feet, those being the victims of imperialism, fascism, and neocolonialism, and those who cannot comfortably wait for a steady parliamentary reform or online petition that is supposed to humanize capitalism or resolve a cultural issue. In a nutshell, workers of the First World are being held hostage and given concessions to keep quiet to the point where they start liking it and, in turn, defend their captors.
No, he's just going to ignore the anti-communist revolutions that plenty of countries have seen. Like, I don't know, the collapse of the Soviet Union might be a good one.
So, those are basically the broad categories of people who end up defending capitalism, despite getting fucked by it day in and day out, to varying degrees. We've managed to get a grasp of their overall motivations and the conditions that bring them into existence. Now, let's consider a few standard accusations that they like to spout when confronted with criticism of their beloved system. What you will often hear are accusations about jealousy and resentment towards the bourgeois that supposedly tempts the communist to call for his overthrow. You will hear how communists are lazy and want to live off of someone else's work. How those who point out the murderous violence of capitalist institutions have a quote-unquote victim mentality and blame outside factors for their own misery while indulging in self-pity. How those who think there is a better system beyond capitalism are childishly naive and utopian. How socialism has been tried and it never worked. The list only keeps going. Since these accusations have been debunked an infinite amount of times through literature, writings, and videos, instead of wasting my time on this, I'll make sure to link you to a bunch of sources, so feel free to take a look.
Wait, Does he actually? Sources and mentioned literature. Fisher, Engels, Parenti, Luxembourg, Philipson, and Rosworski. Okay. Paul Cockshot. Okay. Bastani. And one Zach Cope. Wow. So, okay, so this video... this video does not give, like, a single argument for any of this. He just gives you the statement and then pawns off defending his position to anyone else he possibly can. This is just a propaganda video. I am considering if I want to watch it to the end. Because honestly, I'm really tired. And, stream's been super slow. Honestly, I'd much rather be playing Baldur's Gate 3.
Now, before we end this video with a viable solution which goes beyond this self-patronizing and defeatist attitude, let's consider the quasi-solution that such individuals might propose.
Wait, does he actually have a quasi-solutions, burden of former socialism in future process? Okay, is this where the actual arguments come into play? I'd love to see it.
The most common objection to radical change is the fear of violent upheavals and revolutions, a fear instilled into the mind of the comfortable worker aristocrat who does not want his peaceful existence to get endangered by adventuristic revolutions. There are peaceful ways, he claims, to improve society. Let us be civil and respectful to each other. Let's reach an agreement, strive for reform and compromise, hear out the other side, vote in elections, and so on. He settles for the spoonful of socialism that supposedly makes capitalism work, and accepts social democracy as a quote-unquote compromise between the two systems. Content with breadcrumbs and very temporary and reversible concessions, he remains ignorant to the fact that the maintenance of his beloved social democracy relies on the continued imperialist and neocolonial exploitation and robbery of the Third World, on female and child labor in sweatshops and plantations, on the enslavement and degradation of literally billions of people for his illusion of success and prosperity. In the wake of the ruthless demolition of labor unions and crackdowns on maternal and workers' rights even in their own country, such enlightened centrists end up settling for naive reform, hopeful amelioration and humanization of capitalism through greenwashing and rainbow washing, the repackaging and softening of class oppression, and acceptance of temporary concessions. Unsurprisingly, all of these delusions have been thoroughly debunked by the likes of Rosa Luxemburg more than 100 years ago in her monumental work, Reform or Revolution, and dozens of similar works ever since. So, to conclude this discussion once and for all, here's a Parenti quote for you. The very concept of revolutionary violence is somewhat falsely cast, since most of the violence comes from those who attempt to prevent reform, not from those struggling to reform. By focusing on the violent rebellions of the downtrodden, we overlook the much greater...
Wait, who caused the more violence? The Russian White Army or the Bolsheviks? What even? He pawns off the actual arguments. He doesn't even give a summary of the books he's recommending in their base argument of saying, you know, if you want to go deeper into this, here's my source, but here's like the basic argument to keep this video at a reasonable length. Nope, he just tells you go read the book. Read a book, bro. Read a book. And then gives you a quote that's not actually true. In every revolution, the ones causing the, including the American Revolution, the ones that are more violent are the ones revolting. unless it is done through civil disobedience or through governmental reform. In every other case, yes, the amount of violence put forward will always be the revolutionaries. Even more so if they're the victorious ones. The French Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution. Yeah, the American Revolution. The Civil War. The American Civil War. Yeah, that statement is just straight up historically incorrect.
Greater repressive force and violence utilized by the ruling oligarchy to maintain the status quo, including armed attacks against peaceful demonstrations, mass arrests, torture, destruction of opposition organizations, suppression of dissident publications, death squad assassinations, the extermination of whole villages, and the like.
Wait, extermination of whole village? You say that and death squad assassinations, and the first things that come to mind are the Bolsheviks, which were the winners of their particular revolution. They also were the poster boys for mass arrest, torture, destruction of opposition organizations. I mean, armed attacks against peaceful demonstrations. I don't know a single government that has seen any level of strife not done that at some point or another. So I mean, that's fine. Sure, you can keep that point. But like every single other one, you want the poster boy of those. The poster boy. Look at the Bolsheviks.
Most revolutions begin peaceably. Why would it be otherwise? Who would not prefer to assemble and demonstrate, rather than engage in mortal combat against pitiless forces that enjoy every advantage in mobility and firepower? Peaceful protest and reform are exactly what the people are denied by the ruling oligarchy.
I just realized
The dissidents who continue to fight back,
I just realized I'm doing this Raven backwards. I'm starting white when I should be starting off white. Yeah, man.
try to defend themselves from the oligarchs' repressive fury, are then called violent revolutionaries and terrorists. Alright, you say. I might be tempted to give this post-capitalist alternative the benefit of the doubt. But what about all of those failed attempts at establishing communism during the Cold War? Hasn't that shown us the inability of good intentions to transcend human nature? Hasn't it proven us that seeking change is futile and that radicalist adventurism can only result in tragedy and totalitarian tyranny similar to that of Nazism? Well, lucky for you, I've made quite an extensive video on.
I swear to God, if he says communism, real communism hasn't been tried, I swear to God.
This very topic, tackling all kinds of popular catchphrases, accusations, and dishonest comparisons regarding past socialist experiences. I've also made a video covering the proper attitude towards the mistakes and achievements of those very historical experiences.
Defend or dismiss. Okay, so even with his own stuff, he refuses to actually give any of the argument. It's pure clickbait. Good lord. Because of this, I have no confidence that those videos are actually gonna, like, give anything of substance either.
Beyond that, there's a huge amount of videos by other comrades who've tackled
Go talk to other people, he says, again.
and thoroughly refuted the claim that socialism never worked from various angles, but also objectively criticized the failures of that era. So I'll make sure to link all of those in the description. Regarding the burden of the past on the backs of new generations.
For clarity, he linked 2 videos on economic planning and 3 videos on refuting anti-communism.
In their revolutionary prospects, Karl Marx had the following to say. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. So, the simple conclusion that can be drawn from viewing former socialism dialectically and materialistically is that, despite failing to reproduce itself under the scrutiny of imperialist pressure, embargoes, invasions, coups, and sabotage, and its own inner contradictions, former socialism has nonetheless improved the lives of hundreds of millions of people who previously lived precarious, exploited, impoverished, and wretched lives under colonial and imperialist oppression.
Where is the evidence for that? For all your railing about communism being bad and it will inevitably fall apart. Capitalism is still here, and communism has predominantly died out. And it never gained traction in the rich countries. And the crap countries it took over only became crappier until capitalism showed up and then made it better. Where's the historical precedence for this?
It has launched half of humanity over a century into the future, only in the matter of a few decades, and has, despite all of its mistakes and deficiencies, played an unfathomably progressive.
Is he talking about China as a success of socialism? China? China? Where Mao reportedly killed anywhere from 20 to 100 million of his own people? And that even now is, like as I said earlier in the stream, it is not even truly communist. It's state capitalist. And the greatest jump in their wealth has come from capitalist corporations coming from the capitalist world to then create factories to then hire their cheap labor. And now, because of those socialist legislation, particularly like the one-child policy, has completely destroyed Chinese demographics, and they're about to go through a massive population collapse, which will lead to economic collapse. And they're also looking at a bunch of raw resource crises at the same time. China's about to completely flounder. And all the things that it did jump up in victory over was done through, ironically, capitalism. While Russia, the one that stayed way more communist in actual practice, has fallen even further. They never obtained their height that they achieved in the post-World War II era, in which case they had been propped up by, again, the capitalist country that not only was propping them up, but fighting two entire fronts of a war at the same time. They were fighting on three fronts, effectively. They were fighting on the Western Front in France and Germany, they were fighting in the Pacific Front against Japan, and they were funding the Russian front. Is looking into the Lend-Lease program. So, hold on, I gotta pull up the exact numbers, because numbers are mind-numbing. U.S. deliveries to the Soviet Union. In the tons of material, in total, 17,499,861 tons of material. It was amounted to $11 billion in materials, equivalent to $133 billion in 2021 dollars. Over 400,000 jeeps and trucks, 12,000 armored vehicles, including 7,000 tanks, about 1,386 of which were M3 Lees and 4,102 M4 Shermans, 11,400 aircraft, of which 4,719 were Bell P-39 Airacobras, I guess. I'd never actually heard of this plane before. 3,414 were Douglas A-20 Havocs, and 2,397 were Bell P-63 King Cobras. Oh yeah, I guess that is Cobra. And 1.75 million tons of food. Roughly 17.5 million tons of military equipment, vehicles, industrial supplies, and food were shipped from the Western Hemisphere to the USSR, 94% coming from the US. For comparison, a total of 22 million tons landed in Europe to supply American forces from January 1942 to May 1945. It's been estimated that American deliveries to USSR through the Persian corridor alone were sufficient by U.S. Army standards to maintain 60 combat divisions in the line. We straight up fought 3 fronts. The Soviets, with their 1-to-6 KD ratio against the Germans, were a joke. When they say Russian blood, because they kept spilling it because they couldn't keep it inside their bodies because of their incompetency. 22 million tons of U.S. combat equipment landed in Europe to supply our own guys, and we supplied over 3/4 of that number. Or exactly 3. Well, it was like, I think it's just about exactly 3/4. 22. By, or I suppose I could do 22 times 0.75. 16.5. Over 3/4 of the same material that we supplied our own troops with, we supplied Russia with. We won World War II on every level. Our military-industrial complex in World War II was unstoppable. We could have drove straight through Berlin right to Moscow, and I am still with Churchill that we should have. What success of socialism? Capitalism has absolutely dominated on every metric. Endlessly. Yeah, like, insane.
And positive
I got only 8 minutes left, but it's gonna take me like 30 minutes to get through, and man, I'm crashing hard. For all the passion, I am so tired.
role in human history. The violent and illegally orchestrated death of the Soviet Union should not be a discouragement.
Violent, illegally orchestrated? What? It collapsed under its own weight. It's because all its people left. The Warsaw Pact dissolved of its own accord.
And cause for pessimism, nor is it proof of the futility of our cause. The revolutionary idea is far from dead, as the rich historical heritage and experience, supplemented by new technologies and ever-evolving conditions, transmits to us new prospects and tools for radical change. Keep in mind that even the worst instances of socialism nonetheless gave better results for the majority of the population than capitalism ever could. Now, you may wonder how any of these historical experiences that we keep celebrating and criticizing can possibly translate into concrete guidelines or blueprints for future upheavals. How can we convince people about the validity of our cause, of transcending capitalist realism, if the left has no concrete plan of action, no concrete policy, if we are divided and plagued by sectarianism and infighting? Well, first of all, It's important to note that the material conditions have changed drastically since the 1920s. Capitalism has transformed into something unrecognizable, thanks to the incredible development of the productive forces, automation, the globalization of the world market, novel technologies like the internet, cloud and quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and so on. The answers to the question of the construction of a viable post-capitalist economy and effective economic planning lie precisely in these incredible feats of human ingenuity and our collective ability to use their potential for the benefit of all. Uncontroversially, these tools ought to be leveraged and implemented for the well-being of all of humanity, not for the profit-seeking interests of a self-serving minority. But, as we all know, these technologies are, together with the means of production, currently owned by and employed for corporate interests of the ruling class. The Musks, Bezoses.
How are they keeping them from you? They're trying to sell them to you, desperately. They want you to have it. They just want to ensure that they are not losing in the process. Good lord.
And dozens of invisible billionaire shareholders of the world, whose only goal is maximizing profits, regardless of the societal and environmental cost, robbing you of the surplus value you create and treating you like an expendable commodity. Moreover, the development of automation and AI, for example, incites valid fear and distrust precisely because we cannot hold them accountable for their inevitable misuse. Their grip on the future of the economy and technology seems unbreakable. They keep promising that the simple advancement of technology and their cynical trickle-down philanthropy will prevent the looming climate catastrophe, alleviate poverty, and solve all of our problems. Experience has shown that these promises and reassurances are merely PR stunts and attempts at whitewashing capitalist history and greenwashing its future. They are methods for maintaining the illusion of capitalist realism. Yet, despite all of this, the agents of capitalism are unknowingly setting up the foundations for socialism, with the implementation of these new technologies within their own capitalist enterprises. A bizarre but very real phenomenon explored in the book The People's Republic of Walmart. With the unstoppable growth of corporate monopolies, capitalists have been increasingly implementing novel organizational technologies to optimize their businesses. A side effect of this is the creation of, in essence, enormous planned economies, coordinated and fueled by sophisticated planning techniques for production and distribution, which transcend neoclassical dogmas of the invisible hand of the market, and are effectively setting the foundations of a future globally planned economy. In the wake of rampant monopolization of key industries and the parallel development of dependent, globalized chains of commodity production, the capitalist market has become essentially obsolete, as all decisions regarding prices, production, allocation, and distribution are done by monopolies and cartels with centrally planned predictive algorithms. It would suffice to say that if Walmart, the world's largest corporation by revenue, was its own country, it would be the 25th largest economy of the world in terms of GDP. And we have many such corporations with equally impressive planned
Guy really has no idea how economics actually works. Like, he does not understand what market forces means as a concept at all. Jeez.
internal economies. In short, capitalism is planting the seeds of its own destruction and laying down the sophisticated infrastructure of the Amazons, Walmarts, and Metas of the world, infrastructure and ecosystems that only need to be democratized and reorganized for the benefit of the working class, and not a handful of greedy shareholders and investors. The seizure of these very sophisticated means of production and distribution, and their democratization for the benefit of everyone, is the working class's central task, as the capitalists
You can democratize your companies right now. It's just been proven to that in most cases not be very good, else it would be everywhere. Like, no one's stopping you from democratizing your company.
have already done half of the job for us.
And if you say that the thing stopping you is the competitiveness of the market, then clearly your idea is not very good because it cannot produce the same kind of results as a non-democratized company.
So, to achieve this, what we need is the next step in the evolution of human socioeconomic organization, the true democratization of the workplace and the broader economy. This, however, necessitates the overcoming of private property, the profit motive, and wage labor, and therefore all the symptoms that arise from them, including economic, racial, and sexual inequalities, imperialism, neocolonialism and exploitation, imperialist wars and conflicts, recessions and business cycles, fascism and chauvinism, alienation from ourselves and our surroundings, and the catastrophic implications of the now inevitable climate catastrophe. The methods and tools for achieving this next step in human evolution are already present. Their organizational foundations and principles set by preceding generations, and the brave men and women who valiantly fought and defeated the ruthless force of fascism and pioneered with their attempts of transcending capitalism, of establishing a socialist economy. Their sacrifices and achievements should not die in vain, and all we need to do to continue their legacy is to update, perfect, and polish their methods, separate the wheat from the chaff, and apply them to our current material circumstances, while leveraging modern technological advancements. There are numerous scientific works being made at this very moment, exploring all of the possible ways in which a post-capitalist economy may function, the technologies, systems, and algorithms that could help us in this endeavor of democratizing and perfecting what previous generations and our own class enemies have already laid down. I'll make sure to leave a comprehensive reading list down below, but a few worthy mentions would be Towards a New Socialism, together with the rest of Paul Cockshot's work, then People's Republic of Walmart, Fully Automated Luxury Communism, and the work of Thomas Sardine. In truth, nobody knows exactly how a socialist, let alone communist society will look like. The actions needed to make.
So what you're saying is you're completely incapable of articulating what your idea of, like, what we should try to achieve, which means there can be no plan of how to get there. Period. So why should anyone take this seriously?
The first step have already been demonstrated by comrades from the recent past. Nonetheless, imagining a potential future is a very hard task. With our judgment
Is it that hard? Is it that difficult, really?
and creativity obviously clouded by the fog of capitalist realism. Claiming otherwise would be idealist, utopian, and deceptive. But what we do know for sure is that capitalism, despite all of its attempts to convince us otherwise, is an outdated system. It is preventing humanity from unlocking its true creative and productive potential, while stifling innovation and progress and destroying our planet in the process. In the midst of the dogmatism and pervasiveness of capitalist realism, the future may look nihilistic and hopeless. Yet, despite the completely warranted pessimism of the intellect, uncompromising education, agitation, and organization, with a dose of optimism of the will, is all we really need to overcome our current predicament.
Oh, we're at the end. That was, in summary, an amazing propaganda piece and not a single thing more. That guy is so good. Balkan Odyssey, for clarity, is the name of the channel. This was uploaded April 19th, 2023. I have the thing cropped, so you can't really see it. He is so good at saying so much without actually saying anything at all. Every time he even broached giving an argument backing up a single statement he made, he said, watch a different video, go ask someone else, go read a book. Read a book, kid. That was an incredible journey into nonsense. I mean, maybe I might check out another one of his videos in the future stream, but like, I'm really concerned now that it would be just a waste of time, as it won't actually give me any significant argument. It'll just be making statements without any argument or logic to back them up. because he didn't give a single one. So I'm really tired, and I suppose I did a pretty poor job telling the stream. I thought there might be more interactivity. I don't know. I don't know. I'll probably rename this just reaction to this because it's the only thing really done in the stream. And we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, I'm gonna end it here. I am super, super tired. But I didn't want to not stream tonight. So I guess we did this. Alright, I will catch people another time. If you are watching currently and enjoyed this, then feel free to follow and or subscribe depending on the platform you're on, as I am streaming on 4 different platforms right now, in case you're confused. If you're watching this later and actually watch the end of the video, then you absolutely should subscribe or follow, because I'm going to be making more content. Well, making content, I'll be streaming more like this, and then you will find it as a VOD later. Hopefully the algorithms are kind to me. All the algorithm pantheon I am now supplicating to. Poorly, it seems. And I hope you have a great night, great day, great weekend whenever you're watching this.